The tow truck's chains clanged like a hammer, striking an anvil as the sheriff stood at my locked gate, trying to calm a red-faced woman whose voice carried all the way across the lake, her arms slicing through the morning air while my security cameras blinked red and caught every second of it. You ever find yourself in one of those moments that's so absurd it's almost funny, except you know you're about to pay for it? That was me, watching Karen's SUV lift off the gravel as she shrieked about stolen cars, community property, and how she'd have me arrested for protecting my own damn shoreline. The sheriff just kept repeating, patient as ever, that she had no right to be there, that this was my land, my private lakefront, and she'd been warned. See, the crazy thing is, just an hour earlier I was down by the dock, baiting my lines for a quiet morning of fishing, just minding my business, when I saw her rig parked square on my boat ramp, folding chair set up like she'd reserved the spot. You know the type. HOA president with a megaphone voice, sunglasses flashing like a challenge, acting like every stretch of water belongs to her board. Even at dawn, that level of entitlement just hits different. Now, as the tow truck strained to haul her ride out through the gate she'd wedged open, I felt a surge of adrenaline, part anger, part relief. Because this little circus was months in the making, every scrap of paperwork, every legal notice, every ounce of patience finally adding up to this exact moment. Truth is, this showdown had been building since I closed off my lakefront a few months before, fed up with the parade of community members who thought my property line was some kind of suggestion. Karen, yep, I know, of course her name was Karen, had been spouting the HOA's old myth about a community easement for years, but it was nothing but smoke. The second her SUV tipped up on that hook, my brain flashed back to the first time she tried to claim my shore, her voice bouncing across the cattails, telling me to move my truck so she could enjoy her right to the water. That morning, with her oversized shades and that clipped, bossy tone, she waved a wrinkled HOA newsletter at me, telling me to read the bylaws like they outranked the deed my granddad left me. That was when the hook really went in. See, I tried to play it neighborly at first, pointing at the no trespassing sign, explaining that the property line ran a solid 20 feet past where she'd parked her chair. But when she called 2 more board members to enjoy the lake, I realized the only thing these folks respected was a hard line. So I hit the county records office, had them dig up every deed, every plat, every ancient survey with my name on it, and I spent 2 weekends installing motion sensors and steel locks, even welded a cattle grid behind the main gate. I figured the fight would fizzle out. Instead, she doubled down, letters accusing me of blocking emergency access, environmental complaints, county inspectors showing up, always leaving a little sheepish once they saw my paperwork was flawless. So, that morning, when I saw her SUV blocking my ramp again, coffee mug perched on the roof like she owned the place, I didn't shout. I didn't even approach. I just snapped photos from 3 angles, called the sheriff's office, then the tow company. Yeah, I'd prepaid, knowing this day would come. By the time she noticed me at the dock, she was framed by the sunrise, every ounce of entitlement about to meet reality. She yelled I was harassing her, said she'd sue me, threatened all sorts of recreational rights lawsuits. I just held up my deed and let the silence, and that tow truck rumbling up the gravel, do the talking. She ran for her SUV. The sheriff pulled up at that exact moment, lights bouncing off the pines. For a second, I thought she might ram the gate, but the chain I'd installed the night before held tight. As the hook tightened, the sheriff just shook his head. Karen screamed this wasn't over. But deep down, both of us knew it already was. Every document filed, every bolt tightened, every warning given, it all funneled down to this moment. And standing there on my dock, smelling wet cedar and watching the last of her tail lights disappear, I felt not just vindicated, but strangely exhilarated. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a stubborn neighbor. It was about holding your ground. Of course, if I thought that was the end, I was wrong. 2 days after the tow, I get a thick envelope in the mail. Legalese on cheap paper, claiming I was endangering emergency access and violating community covenants. All bluff. My property wasn't even in the HOA's jurisdiction. It sat a quarter-mile outside their platted area. Still, Karen was banking on intimidation. I called Dean, my lawyer, a wiry guy who closes deals with a smirk. He read the letter, snorted, and sent a response so airtight it could have suffocated a horse. deed copies, maps, a warning that further harassment would mean civil damages. Evenings turned tense, locks checked, cameras rolling, flashlight beams in the trees. Once, I spotted tire tracks near the gate. Another night, a drone zipped over the dock, its green light blinking. I recorded it all, built a digital log for Dean, and the sheriff, by now more than a little tired of HOA wars, swung by just to say he was on my side. A week later, Karen staged a community picnic right at the edge of the lake. Balloons, folding tables, banners screaming, "Our lake, our rules." It was surreal, like a pep rally for trespassing. I stood quietly at the locked gate, watching families set up just over the line, some embarrassed, others eating it up. Karen spotted me, raised her megaphone, and accused me of hoarding nature, inventing a history where the original developer had promised community access. Instead of shouting back, I handed a folder to the nearest reporter, deed maps, legal statements, everything. Cameras caught Karen fumbling when asked for proof. Sheriff arrived, told the crowd to stay off my property or face trespass charges. That night, I welded an extra crossbar to the gate and chained the dock. Dean advised prepping for an injunction. I made sure every permit, tax, and compliance was flawless. If Karen wanted a loophole, I'd make damn sure she didn't find one. Then the raids started, pre-dawn visits with strangers and crowbars. Karen at the wheel with her assistants, trying to break the gate. I stayed calm, filmed everything, called the sheriff, spoke quietly but firm. Each time, she got a little more desperate, a little more unhinged. One morning, her boat trailer slipped off the gravel, sinking into the bank. She spun on her helpers, blaming everyone but herself, all caught on camera. The deputy who arrived looked tired of the whole circus. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to, but I let the rope tighten slowly, knowing the footage alone would win in the court of public opinion. The next move was legal, an emergency injunction delivered in a thick envelope by a nervous courier. The HOA was suing to force my gates open. Dean arrived with a briefcase, and together we walked the property, photographing every lock and sign, prepping for court. On the day, Karen showed up in a pale suit, sunglasses like a shield, 2 board members in tow, and a lawyer trying to make headlines. The judge, no nonsense, asked for proof. Dean handed over deeds and county maps, the restraining order, every incident report. Karen's side offered stories, not documents. The judge denied the injunction, issued a restraining order against Karen and any HOA rep. That should have been the knockout punch. But Karen went for spectacle, printed flyers for a Lakefront Liberation Day, urging a crowd to reclaim the lake. 30 people showed up, some there for the drama, most just holding signs for the camera. Karen shouted through a megaphone, ordering a guy with bolt cutters to break the chain. Sirens wailed. Deputies arrived, read her the restraining order aloud, and when she wouldn't back down, arrested her right there, megaphone slipping from her hand. Within hours, her mugshot hit the internet. Memes exploded, neighbors shook my hand. Even former HOA allies vanished from her side. The storm passed. Autumn crept in. Karen's complaints fizzled. The new HOA board sent a letter, formal, apologetic, asking to bury the hatchet. Drones disappeared, driveways cleared, neighbors waved instead of glaring. For the first time in months, I fished at dawn, watching the sun break over the water without fear of some wild accusation. Dean, ever the pragmatist, told me to keep every scrap of evidence, just in case. I boxed up the extra locks and sandbags, labeled them Karen Era, and stuck them in the loft. But I'd changed, too. No longer just a property owner, but a defender of boundaries, physical and legal. When Karen finally resigned, moved out of state, the neighborhood exhaled. The sheriff stopped by one last time just to say goodbye. Dean sent a final invoice with a note, "Well fought." I hung the letter clearing my property of violations in the hallway, a silent trophy. And as the season shifted, I stood at the dock, thinking of my grandfather, how he'd built this place by hand, how he'd taught me not to back down. The lake was mine again, not because I'd fought the loudest, but because I'd outlasted the chaos, held my ground, let truth wear down all the noise. People now stopped by to shake my hand, some apologizing, others just curious, all a little more respectful of where one person's property ends and another's wishes begin. But here's the thing. There's always going to be another Karen, Another HOA, another fight somewhere. That's the nature of boundaries. Someone will always want to test them. The question is whether you're ready to defend them, patiently, stubbornly, and with just enough humor to keep your sanity. So tell me, where do you draw the line? Would you have stood your ground, or just let it go? Drop your own HOA horror stories below. Tell me what you think about property rights and where the balance should be. Because out here, on the edge of the lake, that's not just a question for lawyers. It's the story of what it means to own a piece of land and defend it.